Chapter 2, Bad Business. The next morning, 3 more miners showed up after shift change. It would take time before word got around and men started lining up at his door. When we have more money, he told Sally, I'll put an ad in the Herald. What do you mean when we have more money? Didn't I tell you? I decided to make you a business partner if you stick around. That way you can share expenses as well as profits. You may feel honored. She screwed up her face. Yeah, if I stick around. Let's go for a walk, he said, into town. They locked up the wagon and strolled over to Golden Street. From somewhere came the sound of hammering, probably another house going up. A motor truck came thundering down the street, doing maybe 10 miles per hour. The town would get quieter around 3 when folks holed up to stay out of the heat. Then it would pick up again when the next mine shift came on. Where are we headed? Sally asked. Nowhere. I just wanted to have a look-see. Do you want a cold soda? I heard they have ice at the market. There's even an ice cream parlor. I can't have beer? No. Just checking. I'll get a sarsaparilla with my own money since we're sharing expenses. But if I'm still getting only third, you should buy the next 2. I can see you have a head for business, Sally. They bought 2 sodas and some cheese and apples for lunch, then sat on the curbstone eating and watching traffic. I believe I'll go back to that bank and open an account, he said. Do you have enough cash for that? You only need $1. I'll put in about 10. That should establish me as regular Rhyolite citizen with credit and such. Give me a good 6 months in this town and I can buy a regular storefront with living quarters upstairs. You'll see, this town is going places. Don't know if I'll stay around that long. Well, anyway, come along and see Cook's Bank. It's got Italian marble floors. I already saw it, but you didn't take a good look. Come on. They walked over to the bank. The same teller was on duty, but Nathaniel ignored him. He asked a clerk for Mr. Cook and was duly admitted to the back office. Sally went with him. Mr. Cook was in his 50s, tall and muscular, looking more like a miner than a banker. He was in his shirt sleeves, wearing sleeve garters. Mr. Strange, I take it? He extended a hand across the desk. Please forgive the informality. Here in the desert, we don't always wear coats during business hours. Understood. Good of you to see me, Mr. Cook. This is my niece, Miss Jezebel. Mr. Cook blinked at the name, but didn't comment. I've had good reports of your institution, Nathaniel said. Highly secure, I'm told. Fireproof building and so on. I propose to open a small token account here, a business account, just to get my name on the books for now. I'm expecting a large sum from the East any day, and I wouldn't like to have any delay in having the check deposited and clearing. I'm sure you understand. Why, of course. Anything to accommodate our customers. If you would just provide the necessary information. He took a thick ledger book from his desk, opened it to a blank page, and slid it across. Nathaniel picked up a pen and dipped it in ink. I'm afraid I cannot yet provide a permanent address other than the post office until I've settled on which property to purchase. But I'll let you know as soon as I decide. Certainly. And I hope you will see us about a mortgage, Mr. Strange. Forgive me, but I suppose you've heard jokes about your strange name. You're forgiven. He turned his attention to the ledger. Afterward, as they strolled down the street, she said, What was that about? What was what about? You know, I don't think you have any big check coming from the East. Why did you bother to start a bank account? Just part of doing business, he said. I'm becoming established in town. They'll remember me at the bank. Those gents I played poker with will remember me. I'll get to be known as an upstanding businessman. My name, he concluded in a lower, more thoughtful tone, will get around. Then he said, look at that. Isn't that something? A man built that house all out of bottles he found in the desert. They call it the bottle house. What's your big hurry to get noticed around town? He could see the way she was looking at him. He gave a sigh and said, all right, you may as well know. I came here to Rhyolite to look for someone. I heard he moved out here. He wrote a letter to his brother in Baltimore, who mentioned it to me. But the thing is, I don't know what name he's using these days. I knew him as Milton Preen. I don't know where to find him. I suspect if my name gets around town, he'll come looking for me. She thought it over, absorbing this information. What's this Milton Preen to you? They continued walking in the summer heat. Finally, he said, we were business partners. I murdered him. She turned to stare, about to say something. He raised a hand to hush her. No questions, please. I'll tell you about it later, maybe. Right now, I don't want to talk about him. It's too damn hot. That afternoon, he taught Sally how to cook scrambled eggs and fried potatoes for supper. Although she grumbled, her results were passable. He figured no one had ever bothered to teach her much of anything. Later, Sally was off getting water from the livery pump, and he was getting ready for possible clients when there was a rap at the open door. He turned to see a well-dressed lady in her 40s. She wore a light blue cotton and carried a matching parasol. Yes, ma'am. May I help you? Would you be Nathaniel Strange? She asked. Her voice was soft for a northerner. The very same, madam. How may I be of service? I am Madame Lamar. Oh, I see. You must be here to accuse me of damaging your merchandise. Look here, madam. Mr. Light has a right to make her own decisions. I don't know what kind of contract you have with her, but if you don't like my artwork... On the contrary, you mistake me, sir. I found your work to be of superior quality. I admire your skill. I am here to purchase your service. That stopped him for a moment. I'm sorry, madam. Do you mean to say you want a tattoo for yourself? Exactly, sir. I wish a tattoo. He helped her into the wagon and offered her tea, which he'd just finished brewing. She accepted, and he poured her some in an earthenware mug. Sally returned, lugging a bucket of water. Sally, please come in. He had a feeling that with this lady, he ought to have a witness, just in case. I may need your assistance. She climbed up and smiled at Madame Lamar. Hello, she said. Hello, Salome. Nice to see you again. I do hope you'll come and visit us again soon. We had such a nice chat. So this is your home here? Sally's my niece, he said. No, she's not, but we'll let that pass. What kind of picture are you going to give me? That depends entirely on your desire, Madame Lamar. What sort of picture would you like, and where? No. As to the picture, I would like you to choose. I can see by these drawings on your wall that you're quite creative. I believe in giving an artist free rein. As to the location, she flopped down on her stomach on the cot and lifted her skirts to reveal her shapely buttocks. He took a step back and studied her form, one finger at his lip, like an artist regarding a blank canvas or a sculptor a piece of marble. Oh, very nice skin, madam. Beautiful, in fact. An honor to illuminate it. I think your left hip, yes? Tell me, Do you have a favorite animal? Bunny rabbits. Perfect. Sally, pay attention now. And I think we'll want the door closed for privacy. He went quietly to work, the image of two playful rabbits in his mind becoming flesh. An hour later, when he was done, she arose and held up her skirts with both hands to examine her hip. Sally held a mirror for her benefit. At first, he feared she was unhappy with his work, since she frowned and said nothing. It will look better once your skin heals, he said. She broke into a beaming smile. She had only been concentrating. Oh, it's quite wonderful, especially the colors. They make my own skin look pinker. I'm quite happy with your work, Mr. Strange. I can hardly wait to show it off. I shan't hesitate to recommend you to any of my ladies who wish to decorate themselves. You should expect more feminine trade in the near future. After she had gone, he stared after her and mused. With a tattoo, a lady is never entirely naked. Do you think I could learn to tattoo? Sally asked. He gave her a speculative look. Do you know how to draw? Next day after breakfast, he said, let's go for a walk. Out of town this time. What about the work? She asked. Aren't you expecting more miners this morning? Not today. Don't you notice something missing? She looked around. What? Was something stolen? No, I mean the sounds. Listen. She shut her eyes a moment. I don't hear nothing. That's what I mean. You can't hear the stamping mill. That's because today's Sunday. The mine has the day off. Shutting down the mill lets the churches have some peace and quiet for once. I guess I'm so used to the noise, I don't even hear it anymore. You're right. It's awful quiet now. They run 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, except for Christmas. You can hear it 10 miles away. Are you going to church? He noticed she didn't say we. Not me. I don't believe in working on the Sabbath, but I'm not a church-going man. Come on, let's pack a lunch and start walking. All the stores are closed today, except for the saloons and churches, of course. When they were well along their way, she asked him where they were going. The sun was nearly overhead with the temperature rising. She carried food in a basket, and he had a water skin slung over his back. Not far, just out to Des Moines. I want to see what it looks like. They tell me it's likely to turn out one of the richest strikes in history. The mine was only a mile outside of town, but uphill. The sweat was making his shirt stick, but Sally seemed cool. She was wearing her bonnet, but what he could see of her face looked easy. Must be getting old, he muttered. She glanced at him, but didn't comment. When they were almost there, they encountered a man with a burro. He came ambling along the road toward them in no big hurry. Nathaniel could see he was an Indian, mainly by the style of hat he wore, a big 10-gallon surrounded by silver discs. He stopped and waited for them to come up to him. Spare some water, mister? He asked. I done give my last drink to my burro a ways back. Sure. Nathaniel passed over the water skin. The Indian drank sparingly and handed it back. The name's Nathaniel. This here's Sally. How's prospecting? Not too good. He rubbed his eyes. Had to come on in when I run out of grub. I found me some more, but it ain't mill grade. They calls me Shoshone Bill. Glad to make your acquaintance. And happy to meet yours. I hope you have better luck next time, Bill. I know someone at the mine as will give me a grub stake. He says Indians bring him luck. I guess I'll be heading back out in a couple of days. Why, that's fine, Bill. I bet you strike it rich. And I tell you what, if you stop by my wagon while you're around, I'll give you a fine tattoo, free of charge. You can't miss my wagon on the way into town. Bill nodded. Okay. He turned and led his burro away. Why'd you tell him that? Sally asked. About the free tattoo? He shrugged. Just have a feeling he might bring me luck. The mine lay spread out under the sun, silent and asleep. The gate was locked, but no watchman around. Or if so, he was napping somewhere. Nathaniel led the way up the hill toward the stamping mill, which jutted 4 stories high and solidly built. Smaller buildings were spread out across the surrounding landscape, with heavy machinery scattered between. Nathaniel stopped to study a structure built of steel and heavy wooden beams. That's the elevator, he said. It goes straight down to the tunnels. Each shift change, men ride down to the darkness to labor for 12 hours, breaking rock down where it's always the same. Cool in summer, warm in winter, always dark. Then they come up and rest a while till it's time to go down again. And think they're lucky to have a job. What about that place? Sally asked, pointing at the mill. What's that for? That's where they crush the ore and mix it with quicksilver to get the gold out. Come on, let's find some shade and have our lunch. While eating her sandwich, she paused between bites. Why are you looking for him if you murdered him? Ain't he dead? He studied the framework of the mine elevator. Remarkable how it resembled a gallows. Don't want to talk about that yet, he said. But when we get back, I'll let you see the clippings. By the time they returned to the wagon, it was early afternoon. They were both hot and tired. The coolest place was Sally's camp underneath the wagon, where she at once threw herself down. He thought maybe she'd take a nap, but she said, Can I see the clippings now? Without a word, he went inside and unlocked a cabinet, rummaged around and withdrew an old leather folder. Outside, he handed the folder to Sally. The clippings were from the Baltimore Sun, old, wrinkled, and stained in places. The dates were more than 10 years old. The one on top was the most recent. Sensational trial ends in manslaughter verdict. Victim's widow in seclusion. Peculiar twist revealed in insurance claim. Strange to be sentenced tomorrow. The most sensational Baltimore trial in years ended today with a verdict of manslaughter against the defendant, Nathaniel Strange, who continues to plead his innocence. The jury spent 3 days in deliberation. According to the district attorney, Mr. Axtell, the jury was confused by the fact that the victim's body was never found. Neither the defendant nor his attorney could be reached for comment. For the benefit of readers who may not have been following the case, the victim, Milton Preen, was a partner with the defendant in their import-export business. It appears Mr. Strange had been having an illicit affair with the victim's wife, Annabelle Preen. Last September, police were summoned to Mr. Preen's office after neighbors reported hearing shots fired. When officers arrived, Preen was nowhere to be found, but there was a revolver found nearby from which 2 shots had been fired. There was blood on the floor, and in a corner of the room, written in blood, were the words "Strange Shot." Mr. Strange's fingerprints were later found on the weapon, and he admitted ownership of it. Police conjectured that Strange had removed the body before they arrived. It should be noted that Mr. Preen's office is located on the docks, only a few yards from the bay. Strange had probably planned to return, retrieve the murder weapon, and clean the blood, but was foiled by prompt response of the police. Strange's story was that he was at home having supper and nowhere near the murder scene. No witnesses could corroborate him. Unfortunately, lengthy dragging of the bay failed to produce a corpse. Forced to testify under oath, Annabelle Preen admitted that she had planned to run away with Strange, although denying their relationship had been consummated. Judge Hopkins, seemingly faced with a possible hung jury, instructed the court that if they were unable to reach a verdict of first-degree murder, they had the option of returning a verdict of manslaughter. However, the jury was cautioned that should the victim's body turn up later, the defendant could not again be charged, since this would constitute double jeopardy. The jury, it appears, agreed to accept this compromise. In an exclusive to the Sun, an odd twist has been revealed in the settlement of the Preen estate. We have learned from his attorney, Mr. Cohen, that Annabelle Preen was written out of the victim's will some time ago. Instead, Preen's entire estate is to go to one Jeremiah Caldwell, a resident of Carson City, Nevada. In addition, there is a sizable life insurance policy of an undisclosed sum with Mr. Caldwell as beneficiary. As of this date, the Sun has obtained no information regarding Mr. Caldwell or his relationship with the murder victim. Annabelle Preen has not been seen since her appearance on the witness stand. She is said to be staying with relatives in Boston. Don't believe everything you read in the papers, he said, taking back the folder. You better take a nap. I'm going down to the 66 Club. I don't want a nap, she said. I'm going to see Catherine and Madame Lamar. You do that. He turned away from her questioning gaze. Did you shoot him or not? He turned back to study her a moment before answering. Not that I recall, but Milton Preen is gone. He no longer exists. So in a way, you might say I killed him. He turned away before she could ask more questions. In the saloon, he again encountered Edmund J. Fish, this time standing at the bar. Nothing like a cold beer on a hot day, Fish said. Nathaniel agreed and ordered one for himself. Not playing cards today? Fish grinned. I'm a family man, Mr. Strange, and a churchgoer. I don't truck with cards on a Sunday. Drinking is something else again. Jesus didn't play cards that we know of, but he drank wine. You have a point there, Mr. Fish. No, I don't feel so guilty. He took a swig of chilled beer. How's the real estate business? Still booming, like everything else in this town. Come down to my office tomorrow and I'll show you what's available. Better grab some property while you can still yet afford it. Perhaps I'll do that. But I was thinking of renting that first. I'm sure we can work something out. But look who's here. Our friend Hernandez of the Herald. You want to know anything about this town? You ask him. He's practically a historian. Hernandez nodded to both men and ordered a whiskey. How much gold is in that mine? Nathaniel asked him. Hernandez shrugged. More than enough. I'm told the vein is about 60 feet wide and no end to it. They're only getting started up there. Harris made the first strike in 1904, so they've only been taking ore out for less than 4 years. Only thing that worries me is there's so much high grade being taken, it's going to depress the market price for gold. We'll have to come up with some more uses for it besides gold teeth and jewelry. He tossed down his shot glass. Solid gold buggy whips, maybe, Fish suggested. Automobiles are the common thing. Hernandez turned to Nathaniel. Say, aren't you that new tattoo artist in town? That's me. Why you ask? Nothing, except my nose for news. There ain't that much news around Rhyolite, so we'll do what we can. I talked to some of the miners. They say you do good work. Madame Lamar agrees. Would you mind if I wrote a feature article about you? Why not? That's free advertising. He refrained from asking how Hernandez happened to be talking to Madame Lamar. Drop by my wagon tomorrow. I'll show you some samples of my work. maybe one of my clients would let you watch me perform. I will definitely do that. By the way, I hear there's somebody else in town asking questions about you. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Really? Who would that be? He tried to sound casual. Can't say. I mean, I don't know the name. I was making my usual rounds at the jail yesterday. The constable said one of the mine investors was around asking if they knew anything about you. He wouldn't give me the name, though. The constable promised to keep an eye on you. That gives me an idea for a tattoo. It would suit a reporter like yourself. An eye tattoo. Then you could say you're keeping an eye on yourself. Hernandez laughed. Long as it's not in the middle of my forehead. Wouldn't want to scare folks. Nathaniel sat around the saloon for a while, talking to the reporter and anyone else who happened to wander through. Hernandez promised to drop by in a day or two for his feature story. It was still early when Nathaniel left him at the bar. He went for a stroll through the streets of the town. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like aimless sightseeing, but he was looking for something in particular. He was looking for empty storefronts. There weren't many. Business was booming, as Mr. Fish had said, but there were a few. One storefront on Golden Street he liked. The sign painted on the window said haberdashery, apparently left by the previous tenant. There were still a few display cases scattered about inside. Another sign said, for sale or rent, E.J. Fish Realty. Nathaniel nodded to himself and headed back toward the wagon. To his surprise, Sally was cooking dinner, a big pot of beans and ham hocks. He could smell collard greens, and he asked where she'd found them. Madame Lamar's cook gave me some. She's a nice colored lady from Louisiana. You seem to be getting along well with Madame Lamar. I thought you didn't know how to cook. This ain't cooking. This is just how beans and collards. Susie, that's the cook, says she's going to show me how to make hush puppies. Maybe Madame Lamar will be a good influence after all. Then he noticed the sketchbook lying on a bench. Is that mine? He asked. She blushed a little. Doesn't you look? I found it in the cabinet over there. Wasn't being used, so I borrowed it, sort of. I'll pay for it. He turned it over and opened the front page to a sketch of a young woman seated in a garden. You drew this? I did. I'm sorry it's so bad. I'll pay you for the book. Never mind that. I wouldn't say it was bad. In fact, I'd say it was damn good. Why didn't you tell me that you could draw that well? Ain't nowhere near as good as your pictures. I never took no lessons. He carried the drawing to the light, turning it around. A few lessons couldn't hurt, but I'd say you have a talent, a feeling for composition. Who's the lady? Name's Violet. Works for Madame Lamar. I see. He flipped through the book, but the other pages were blank. I guess you did this today. You keep the book. When I have time, I'll give you some lessons on perspective, if you'd like me to. She blushed again. Yes, I'd like that all right. Next morning, the man called Omar returned. His size still made Nathaniel uneasy. It wouldn't be good to cross this fellow. How's your money today? Nathaniel asked. I mean, the tattoo I gave you last week. Omar climbed up into the wagon. Is good. Down in the mine, we works with our shirts off. The men, they all admire. Some says they wants money tattooed on themselves. I tells them, don't try to spend it at Madame Lamar's. Nathaniel grinned. Let's have a look. Omar took off his shirt and lay down. Sally was busy at the stove, boiling some needles. This looks pretty good. In fact, it could turn out to be a real work of art. I never thought of doing money before. Like I said last time, I'm not sure this is legal. If you get arrested, don't tell them where you got it, okay? Omar mumbled an okay. I'm going to put in some finishing touches, a few more details. Might as well make it complete. He prepared his inks and needles and went to work. Omar was apparently tired after his long shift in the mine. He dozed off and snored. Then he awoke with a start. He mumbled something. Did you say something? Nathaniel asked. Omar turned his head. There's one fellow didn't like it much, he said. And who would that be? Kramer, Jed Kramer. He's one of the mine owners. He was hanging around when I come out of the pit the other day. I had my shirt off. He asked me where I got the money tattoo. So I told him. He said I shouldn't have dealings with you, that you bad business. Bad business, eh? Wonder why he said that. Have I met this Kramer? Omar gave a shrug, which nearly caused Nathaniel's needle to go astray. He sounded like he knows you from somewhere. Thanks for the information, Omar. I'll have to talk to this Kramer. When Omar had gone, Nathaniel gazed out the open door. He was relieved the big man had departed. At the moment, he had no other customers waiting. He turned to Sally. I'd like you to clean up if you don't mind. I have a few errands to run in town. But she had more questions. If you didn't shoot him, why did you say you murdered him? You scared me when you said that. I'm sorry I scared you. I guess I wasn't thinking. To answer your question, I was tried and found guilty by a jury of my peers. The law says I killed Milton Preen, so I guess I did. I got sentenced to 10 years, but I got off with 4 on good behavior. Before I went to prison, I was an amateur painter, landscapes mostly, a few portraits. I started learning tattoos in the state prison. While I was there, I met another inmate who had a dragon tattoo on his back. It was the finest artwork I'd ever seen. I asked him where he got it. He told me about Mr. Liu down in Chinatown. After I got out, I looked up Mr. Liu. I worked for him for 3 years until he went to heaven. He taught me everything I know. You got any more questions? Yes, but it'll wait. Looks like you're in a hurry. I'm in no hurry to answer. I'm not even sure I should be telling you these things. I'll be back in an hour or so. He walked downtown to the office of Edmund J. Fish. He was half surprised to find the man in his storefront. He had the impression Mr. Fish did much of his business out of the 66 Club. Fish asked Nathaniel to have a seat while he wrapped up some paperwork with another client, a rangy gentleman who looked like he'd just wandered in off the desert. Nathaniel used the time to glance at a copy of the Herald. The headline said, "Record Construction Boom." When Fish was ready, he invited Nathaniel to sit by his desk. Nathaniel told him what he wanted. Easy enough, Fish said. That place has only been vacant a week. Nothing stays vacant for long in this town. It's going to cost you $25 a month. Why not make a down payment and buy it outright? Or another place, even better. You're considered an established businessman, Mr. Strange. The bank would extend you credit. Strange gave him a polite smile. I'm not sure how long I'll be staying here, Mr. Fish. Don't know if this desert heat will agree with me. That storefront suits me fine for now. If I should decide to purchase, you'll be the first to know. Well, suit yourself. Just remember, the way things are going, property may double in value in the coming year. You think it over. Anyway, here's the keys. You go take a look around inside. If it suits you, come back and I'll take your rent money. Good enough. We'll see you in a bit. Nathaniel rose to go. By the way, do you happen to know Mr. Jebediah Kramer, the investor? Nathaniel paused. No, but I've heard of him. Isn't he a mine owner? He owns some shares. He's mainly a land speculator, sort of runs the board of trade. I hear he was in the 66 Club asking about you. I'm afraid I've not yet had the pleasure, Nathaniel said. I have a feeling he may not like tattoo artists, Fish mused. On Monday evening, Nathaniel hung a closed sign on the wagon, and he and Sally swept the new shop out and did a quick cleanup. He could see that dust drifting in from the desert would be a problem. They moved into the storefront the following day. You can move your bed into the back room, he told her. I'll still sleep in the wagon. You won't have to lie on the ground anymore. I sort of like sleeping on the ground. It's nice and cool. Well, I was a little worried about snakes and scorpions. She gave him a horrified look, and he burst out laughing. Ha ha ha, just kidding, he said. I haven't seen any of those around. You're mean. Meaner than a rusty nail. I apologize, Sally, though I do think you'll be better off indoors. He got his mule out of the livery and moved the wagon to the alleyway behind the shop. Then he scraped the haberdashery sign off the window and replaced it with a temporary sign painted on cardboard. In strange, artiste of epidermia, tattooist. He and Sally managed to wrestle the dentist chair out of the wagon and into the storefront. Then Nathaniel pronounced himself ready to open for business. By then, it was late in the day, so he escorted Sally to the same Chinese restaurant where they dined on their first day in town. He told her Mr. Liu had taught him about Chinese food, but not about chopsticks. This town has all the latest modern improvements, he said over his bowl of chop suey, including our storefront. It's got electricity and running water and that bathtub. This evening, I'll warm some water on that coal stove and have me a good long soak. Between mouthfuls, she said, What about Annabelle? He was silent for a moment. You're a nosy little critter, ain't you? What about her? What happened to her? Were you really going to run away together? Again, he was silent a moment before answering. I loved her, and she wanted to get away from her husband. Milton was a swine. She nodded, thinking it over. He expected she would ask him another question, but she appeared satisfied for the moment. Walking back after supper, he said, Remember what I said about the snallygaster? How it can make things disappear? Well, sometimes it takes people away. Wednesday, he put an open for business sign over the front door. That morning, he had 3 more clients, all miners. He supposed he might get more business when his new location became known. But even 3 wasn't bad. After a new meal of chicken soup, he told Sally he wanted to go for another walk. Too hot, she said. I think I'll stay here and draw something. Good idea. Madame Lamar is likely getting tired of seeing you around by now. If any clients show up, just tell them I'll be back in 2 or 3 hours. He left the shop and walked south this time, away from the mine. Rhyolite wasn't that large. He could probably walk all the way to Bullfrog, the next town, without getting tired. But it was hot. There were plenty of saloons, though most of them weren't busy at this time of day. He walked for several blocks, decided he was thirsty, and stopped for a beer. The saloon had an electric fan. He sat in front of it for a while until he realized the hour was getting late. Suddenly, he had a bad feeling, as if he should be at the storefront. He paid his tab and hurried back the way he'd come. As usual, the street was quiet this time of day. The silence made him uneasy. He'd never noticed before how quiet it was, despite the distant rumble of the stamping mill. When he arrived, he found the front door wide open. He entered and shouted, "Sally!" After a moment, she emerged from the back room, rubbing her eyes. "Why was the front door open?" he demanded. "To let in more air. I was just lying down for a bit." "In the future, keep it shut if I'm not here, please." He glanced around, expecting to see something out of place. "Was anyone here while I was gone?" "Just one fella. I told him you weren't here. He looked at some of your drawings on the wall. He said he might come back tomorrow. Then he let me draw a picture of him." "Ah, can I see it? Or did he take it with him?" "He said it was good, but he didn't want it." "I'll get it." She went to the back room and returned a moment later with her sketch pad. She held it out to him. "What do you think?" He studied the portrait for a moment. "It's good, true to life and realistic." "He told me his name is Mr. Kramer." "His name used to be Preen, Milton Preen." That evening, Catherine Delight showed up towing Samantha, her friend and co-worker. Samantha wanted a butterfly on her shapely thigh. Nathaniel went to work, with both Catherine and Sally paying close attention. Sally picked up her sketchbook and began to copy his design. "A good many ladies are partial to butterflies," Nathaniel remarked. "I like them myself because they allow me free rein with color and form." Samantha was pleased with the result. By the time the two women left, Nathaniel decided it was supper time. He did the cooking this evening, concentrating on a pot of rice and beans. "I miss the seafood back in Baltimore," he said. "I'd like to toss in some shrimp or fish with this. The market here has salt cod and canned horse mackerel, but it's not the same." "What happened to Annabelle?" she blurted out. Nathaniel didn't bother to turn around. He'd been expecting the question. "When I was in prison, she went to live with a sister in Boston. I only got one letter from her. That was after I'd been in for 6 months. It was a goodbye note. She said she hadn't wanted to believe I was guilty of murder, but after thinking it over, she didn't see how it could be otherwise. She wasn't sorry Milton was dead. In fact, she had long prayed for deliverance from him, but she could not reconcile herself to living with the killer. Why couldn't we have just run off to Oregon the way we'd planned? She asked me not to write or to try to see her after I got out." "Did you try to find her later?" "Of course. I wrote several times from prison, but the letters were never answered. Then I got one back marked moved, no forward. After I got out, I made some inquiries, but it appeared both Annabelle and her sister had moved on. Disappeared, just as if the snallygaster took them." "But what about Mr. Preen?" "Enough!" He spooned food into bowls and put them on the overturned packing crate that served them for a table. "I'm tired. I'll tell you the rest later. I promise." Next morning, Nathaniel busied himself painting a 7-pointed star on the door of his storefront. He finished before his first client arrived, a miner with some extra cash. He wanted a dancing girl on his bicep. That took extra time and skill, for which Nathaniel was well paid. Later, he told Sally he'd be making a deposit at the bank the next day. Sally surprised him by saying she wanted to open an account of her own. "To establish myself." "Don't know as how they'll let you, being a girl and under 21. I'll talk to Mr. Cook about it." Around 2 o'clock, Hernandez from the Herald came by. He looked at the drawings on the wall and asked a few perfunctory questions. Nathaniel offered him a free tattoo, but he declined. He stopped at one particular drawing near the front door. "I didn't think you'd be doing landscapes." Nathaniel peered over the man's shoulder. He'd forgotten about that one. "Oh, Sally painted that. An artist of my type rarely gets to do landscapes. I've been giving her a few lessons. Well, that's not bad. Where's Sally now? I'd like to encourage her. I sent her to buy a fresh chicken. There she is, coming down the street. Ah, then I'll say hello on my way out. Nathaniel turned back to what he'd been doing, polishing the fittings on his dentist chair. When he'd finished the job, Sally still hadn't returned. He looked out the front window. Hernandez and Sally were deep in conversation. Nathaniel shrugged. None of his business. He always tried to mind his own business. Later that day, Shoshone Bill, the Indian, showed up. He was wearing a new pair of overalls. Been thinking about getting a tattoo? Nathaniel asked. Yeah, been thinking about it. I believe I'd like a rattlesnake. That's easy enough. Whereabouts? On your shoulder? Bill nodded and took off his shirt. Nathaniel had him sit in the chair while he got his needles and ink ready. You're looking good, Bill. Lots better than when I saw you out in the desert. New outfit and all. Mr. Kramer bought it for me, Bill said. Kramer? Nathaniel paused. What do you have to do with him? Bill settled back and stared at the ceiling. He's the fella what grub stakes me. A couple years back, I found the Indian Billy for him. The Indian Billy mine? You're saying you're the one who found it. Didn't you file a claim for yourself? Huh. I can tell you're not from around here. It's hard for an Indian. If I filed a claim and turned it out any good, some white man would jump it before I could turn around. Besides, you got to fill out location papers, and I never learned to write. So instead, I work for Mr. Kramer. He stakes me, and if I find anything, he gives me something. Last time out, I found some pretty good quartz. He wants me to go back there and put up a cairn with a copy of the papers. He gave me a new pair of overalls and $5. What did he give you for finding the Billy? Huh? He paid me $50. Nathaniel went silent, thinking as he worked on the coiled rattlesnake on Bill's shoulder. Finally, he said, That sounds like Preen, all right. I mean Kramer. Just remembered, Bill said. I done told Mr. Kramer I was coming to see you. He said to tell you that you ought to join up with the Board of Trade, being a businessman and all. You should come see him tomorrow at the office. Nathaniel gave a tight grin. I just might do that, Bill.